236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the briefing with me, Esther McVeigh, standing in for Gloria De Piero for one day only. Phew, you say. Lots coming up today as our pupils head back to school. This week we're talking about masks in classrooms, staff shortages, and how do we protect our children's learning. We're asking what can be done to help people as energy prices are sent to rocket. And we're looking across to the States, which seems more divided than ever. But first, here's the news.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 12 o'clock. Secondary school pupils in England are being told to take COVID tests before starting the new term. Face masks will be mandatory in school for students for at least the next 3 weeks, and classes may be merged if too many teachers are off sick. The new rules are being introduced by the Education Secretary to try to curb the spread of the Omicron variant of coronavirus. Nadeem Zahawi says schools must do everything they can to protect face-to-face learning.
Keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicenter, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year. Then I don't want children to be wearing masks.
Meanwhile, the Education Secretary also says there's nothing in the data that justifies extending COVID restrictions. Currently in England, face masks are mandatory on public transport and employees are encouraged to work from home. On Wednesday this week, the government's reviewing the current COVID Plan B regulations. In other news now, legal documents that Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex case against him, they're going to be unsealed and made public. The Duke of York's legal team say the case should be thrown out because of a 2009 settlement between Virginia Giuffre and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Ms. Giuffre alleges Andrew sexually assaulted her when she was 17. The Prince denies any wrongdoing. Royal commentator Jenny Bond says he's not facing a criminal trial.
This is a civil law case, and a judge, and if it comes to it, a jury will rule. And I think the man is innocent until proven guilty. That is the way we work, and we should be careful of that. But there's no doubt that his judgment, if nothing else, has been called into question by the fact that he has had friendships not with just one sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, but now we know two, a very long-standing friendship with Ghislaine Maxwell, which goes back to university days.
Hundreds of thousands of people have signed a petition calling for Tony Blair to be stripped of his knighthood. The former Prime Minister was included in the New Year's honours list, but critics say the 2003 invasion of Iraq makes him unsuitable for the Queen's highest honour. More than 360,000 people have supported the campaign to take back his new title. Tributes have been paid to a 14-year-old girl who died after being hit by a suspected drug driver on New Year's Eve. Olivia Kolek was struck by a grey Mercedes in Rowley Regis in the West Midlands and died at the scene. Her family say she was the brightest star in their lives. A 39-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of causing death by driving while under the influence of drugs. He's been released under investigation pending further inquiries. Ministers are being urged to bring in a new law that would guarantee all workers 2 weeks of paid leave after a bereavement. The SNP's Patricia Gibson is bringing forward a private member's bill to Westminster. She says it would allow people time to grieve without worrying about financial pressures. 2 people are missing after wildfires in the US. Flames in Colorado spread over an area of 9 square miles, destroying nearly 1,000 homes and buildings. Police don't know yet what caused the blaze.
The origin of the fire hasn't been confirmed. It's suspected to be power lines, but we are investigating that today. And we have folks on the ground as we speak trying to pinpoint that cause.
As many of us took up DIY, brought new pets, or maybe even learnt a new outdoor hobby in lockdown, thousands of us also gave ourselves injuries in the process. According to new NHS figures, it led to hospital admissions for over 8,000 tool accidents, more than 7,000 dog bites, and over 5,000 people hurt themselves falling off playground equipment. That's all your news for now. I'll have more in half an hour. Now back to the briefing with Esther McVeigh.
Welcome upon the briefing in the next hour. 2021 was a turbulent year in politics, so what's in store for this coming year? John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent, will be giving us his predictions. And the government has said that keeping schools open is its #1 priority. We're talking with Robert Halfon, chair of the Education Select Committee, about masks in classrooms, staff shortages and how we keep pupils in school. And our energy bills could rocket when the price cap ends in April. I'm talking to a Tory MP calling on the government to step in to help consumers. Give me your political briefings. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at GBNews. Well, they say a week is a long time in politics, and a year is a very long time indeed. But what might happen in 2022? Will Boris Johnson still be the Prime Minister at the end of it? To help us look forward, I'm delighted to be joined by The Independent's chief political commentator, John Rentoul. Hello, how are you this morning?
Hello, Esther. Happy New Year. I'm very well, thanks.
So, this time last year, lots was happening, but your predictions for this year coming, what do you see? What do you see happening, John?
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Yeah. Making predictions is a fool's game. So let's get to it then, shall we? Boris Johnson will stay Prime Minister. I think there's no doubt about that. I think he'll have a bit of a dead cat bounce recovery. I think he's dropped like a stone in the opinion polls over December. But I think he made the right decision on not imposing further coronavirus restrictions, just before Christmas. And I think he will gain a bit of credit for that, not least from people like you, Esther, who voted against him. And I think peace will break out in the Tory party for a bit, but then we are heading for a terrible situation in April when the taxes go up and energy prices go up, as you were mentioning there. So I think most of this coming year, Keir Starmer is going to be well ahead in the opinion polls, and you know what Tory MPs are like, Esther. They're going to start panicking.
Absolutely. I think because for a long time people haven't seen this sort of midterm drop in the opinion polls. That sort of seems to be from yesteryears. We're used to sort of seeing a steady lead or a steady opinion poll sort of readings, and I think maybe we're going back to a different era in politics. Remember those midterm, you could be sort of 18, 20 points behind.
Yes, well, and Ed Miliband, for example, was ahead in the opinion polls for a lot of that time when David Cameron was Prime Minister. Didn't do much good at the end, and I suspect that is going to be Keir Starmer's big problem. He has to really work hard to establish Labour's economic credibility over the coming year. I'm afraid calling for a cut in VAT on energy bills doesn't cut it. For me, that sounds like irresponsible, funny money economics. But you Conservative MPs seem to be falling into the same trap of just calling for the government to dole out more money, which is not quite what you'd expect from the Conservative Party. So maybe the Labour Party will get away with it.
I think that calling for a reduction in a VAT is viewed in a different way. That was something that was meant to have been a Brexit dividend, that we would be in charge of our taxes. It's something we could possibly do to help the consumer. So I think that will be looked upon favourably, and also looking at those sort of green levies on the bills more than any other country.
It's a terrible idea. Cutting VAT on energy bills is a really bad policy. It's bad for the climate, and it's bad for social justice because it means people with big houses get a bigger tax reduction. So that's a terrible idea, and I'm disappointed that the Labour Party's been backing it. Plus, where is the money coming from? I mean, just because the government has borrowed £400 billion that it didn't have doesn't mean it can just go on borrowing even more. We have to balance the books at some point.
And they might look at a windfall tax on some of the oil coming in from the sort of North Sea. So I think there will be different ways to look at it. But I think what they're saying is we know what's coming forward. There is going to be, cost of living increases there. How do we support things using the levers that we've got? And Conservatives would say, obviously, we wouldn't be looking for increases in taxes. Could we use that? But who do you see as people coming forward? What other predictions? Who do you see that might be the stars in 2022?
Well, you, Esther, obviously.
Oh, no, come on.
No, I think it's going to be a very important year for Rachel Reeves as Shadow Chancellor. She's got to prove herself against Rishi Sunak, who is still the most popular politician in Britain, although he will face some incredible challenges this coming year, precisely because of those tax rises that are coming up and the cost of living pressures. But the question is whether Rachel Reeves can establish herself as a credible alternative, or just carp from the opposition and offer free money. I mean, I think that is the real clash to watch over the coming year, is Rachel Reeves versus Rishi Sunak.
And of course, names that we learnt over 2020 and 2021, whether it was Valance or Whitty, all of these names, are there new names that we think we might hear? I've written one down there, Jonathan Brearley, Chief Executive of Ofgem. Do you think there will be a new set of names by the end of 2022 that we'll all know?
Well, possibly, but Professor Sir Chris Whitty is probably going to continue to be quite important, and Patrick Vallance. I mean, I'm afraid, coronavirus isn't going to go away. Although I think, the idea of learning to live with it is going to move to a new phase fairly soon. I certainly hope so. But I mean, I remember predicting this time last year that 2021 would be the year we saw the back of arguments about Brexit, and we saw the back of coronavirus restrictions. So that turned out to be no good at all. Because I think turning to Brexit in the coming year, I think the most important political story for Boris Johnson could well be the continuing problem of small boats crossing the Channel, because that makes a mockery of the promise to take back control of our borders. And it suggests that having done Brexit, he hasn't actually succeeded in the most important, well, for a lot of people, one of the most important parts of that, which is giving us back our control of immigration policy.
And I can't disagree with you there, John. Do you think things could get easier after the elections in France? Do you think then we might be able to do a deal there? People are talking about that now, that actually it's the elections that's prevented us doing a deal with sort of the immigration crossings. Do you think so?
No, I think that's a happy Tory fantasy. And also, I mean, those elections aren't until April. I mean, and if there's mild, calm weather, there will be large numbers of people coming across before then. And I think that is going to cause the Conservative Party some considerable difficulty, because Priti Patel has been quite unable to get a grip on the situation. Not her fault particularly, because it is an impossible problem to deal with. I mean, the problem is that people know that once they've taken those terrible risks crossing the Channel, they're most unlikely to be deported. Once they get here, they are most likely to be able to stay, and that is what's driving the traffic. And there's no real agreement we can reach with the French that would be able to curtail that, unless the French give us control of all their beaches over a 100-mile stretch, so that we, or at least our police and presumably military, could police all those beaches. Even then, I'm not sure that would work. But that's not going to happen anyway, whether Emmanuel Macron has been re-elected or not.
And the offshore processing centres, do you think we'll get that through Parliament? Do you think there will be agreement there, so we're not dependent on France? It's something that we ourselves will be able to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a possibility, but we still haven't identified an offshore place. We haven't identified another country where these centres could be set up. So, I mean, I suspect what the government may end up doing is detaining new arrivals in the UK somewhere, which is going to be a huge undertaking and of questionable legality, and it's going to cause all sorts of problems with international treaties, the European Convention on Human Rights, the 1951 Refugee Convention. Those are going to be called into question, and there's no way that I would have thought that Parliament is going to agree to repudiate those kind of international agreements. And I think that is where Boris Johnson is going to end up in real difficulty.
John, you said predictions were a fool's game. You did predictions last year. Did you get any right? You told us some of the ones you didn't get right. Did you get any right from last year?
Yeah, no, I did quite well last year, but that's because I was cheating and only doing really tame, cautious predictions. Like I suggested that Gavin Williamson might be moved from the education department. I mean, that was a really cowardly prediction. And I suggested that Sajid Javid might come back into the cabinet. So yeah, and Sadiq Khan, I said he would win re-election in London. I suggested the SNP would win the Scottish Parliament elections. That wasn't difficult. I mean, what I failed to predict was that the SNP would actually fail to win an overall majority, which was the really significant development there. But for the coming year, I'm going to be cowardly again and suggest that all the main parties will keep their existing leaders, including Boris Johnson.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us today, and I will speak to you soon, no doubt, John. Thank you very much. So this time last year, the government said our children were going back to the classroom and then abruptly decided to keep them at home learning online instead. They are determined to keep pupils in school this year, and mass testing and masks in classrooms are two of the measures being brought in. One man who knows just how damaging school closures have been to our children is Robert Halfon, chair of the Education Select Committee and Conservative MP for Harlow, and I'm delighted he joins me now. Hello, Robert. So, look, big day tomorrow. Most pupils going back to school. Big week this week. How do you see the mass testing going?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on. But I should give a big thank you to the teachers and support staff who are doing everything possible to keep our children learning and get the schools open for the new year. But testing is, of course, it's a difficult issue. As I understand it, there were about 20 million tests going on in schools or given to schools in early December. The government have ordered another 17.6 million testing kits for schools. I don't have a problem with testing in schools. I think it's important. It gives parents security. It gives staff security. What I want to do is see the schools open and the children learning and not being sent home in vast numbers as we saw before Christmas.
And that's what I was hoping to speak to you about. What other mitigating factors could be done? What else could be done to make sure pupils are back in school? I mean, we've had 33 million school days lost to pupils. Just before Christmas, 230,000 pupils weren't in the classroom. I know you want them back in school. What else do you think we could do to make sure they are there?
Well, there's also it's not just the 230,000 that weren't in school. There's also 100,000 what I've called the ghost children who've, for the most part, not returned to school hardly at all since they were fully open again last year. And what I've suggested to the government is that they, with their database of schools around the country, is they set up task forces to help those schools that are having problems. So, for example, if a school has an issue with teachers and support staff at home because of COVID, the government would support them with the local authorities, the public health authorities, not just with providing equipment to the schools, but also supporting them with supply teachers and support staff. I think that would make a difference, and also working with these schools perhaps to merge classrooms with schools nearby where that's possible. They may not be able to do it everywhere, but just because you can't do it everywhere, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it anywhere.
And you will understand better than most, Robert, the damage that has happened to our young generation, pupils who haven't had the education they would have expected over the last 2 years nearly. And the Ofsted report was absolutely damning about how children had suffered in that period. So I think this push from you, from me, from other MPs to say it is crucial now children are in school.
Well, that's absolutely right. By being at home, despite the efforts of teachers and support staff, too many children did very little learning. We've damaged their mental health. You know, mental health referrals amongst young children has gone up by 60%. During the lockdown, eating disorders amongst young girls went up by 400%. So we've damaged their mental health. We've damaged their educational attainment, and we've damaged their safeguarding in many ways, children being exposed to county line gangs, online harms, tough domestic situations sometimes, and we've damaged their life chances. So we need to get them back into school, keep the children and pupils and students learning again, and make sure that hundreds of thousands of children are not being sent home. And that's why I welcome what Nazim Zahawi is trying to do, the Secretary of State, to keep our schools open. But we need a proactive policy where the government literally help individual schools where there are problems.
Now, I know you've been concerned about this guidance that, pupils should be wearing masks for a full day, every day in school. And I see there's been a backlash, whether, ministers coming out, groups, charity groups coming out, people coming out saying children shouldn't be wearing masks all this time in school. So how are we going to make sure that they're not wearing masks? What do we need to do there? Is it more ventilation? What do we need to do?
Well, the government have made the decision about masks for the next 3 weeks till the 26th of January. I do have real worries about this. The Children's Minister came to my committee, the Education Committee in Parliament, in December and said, literally, there is very limited evidence as to the efficacy of masks in educational settings. We know that the Children's Commissioner is concerned about children wearing masks. Even Professor Van Tam has said that it does limit expression and education. And the problem with masks is it can have an effect on children's well-being and mental health and education, emotional understanding. So we need to be very clear that masks have significant problems, especially to children who have impediments or as disadvantages of some kind. And just listen to the National Children's Deaf Society, who said that education will suffer disproportionately under a government's mask advice. So we need to, I really do have worries about the mask policy, and I hope very much the government think again on this.
Now, we've been talking about what's going to happen in 2022. Can I have a sneak preview from you as the chair of the Select Committee? What will you be hopefully looking at in 2022? Will you be putting, again, pressure on government to get children back into schools?
Well, I hope very much I won't have to do that. I've been doing it for the past 18 months to 2 years since the beginning of the first lockdown. I always thought it was a mistake to close the schools for most pupils. And I hope that we do keep our schools open. I hope that we come out of the pandemic and focus on issues that really matter to people up and down the country, particularly the cost of living, the rising energy bills that people are facing, because this is going to cause a huge amount of difficulty to struggling families. Robert Halfon, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Now, 2022 looks like being an expensive year. Inflation is on the up, and so are household bills. I'm talking to a Conservative MP next who wants government to help where they possibly can when the price cap ends in April. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
There, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And from Tuesday, the 4th of January, we are presenting
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. I'm Esther McVeigh, standing in for Gloria De Piero today. Now, we often feel the pinch in January, don't we, after forking out for presents and Christmas food. But this year, there's a real cost of living hike coming. And in April, the energy price cap ends. With wholesale gas prices having rocketed in recent months, our energy bills could rise by hundreds of pounds. A growing number of Conservative MPs, including me, are very worried about rising costs. And yesterday wrote to the Prime Minister and Chancellor. I'm delighted to be joined by Craig McKinley, who organised the letter. He's the Conservative MP for Thanet. Hello there, Craig. So tell me, why the letter? Why now?
Well, I see on your programme you've been discussing sort of forecasts for the year ahead. Well, my big forecast for the year ahead is when Ofgem do their reappraisal of the energy price, the fixed price cap for April onwards. I think it's going to be a truly horrendous bill. As you said, we've got international wholesale gas prices have gone through the roof, and it will be based on those prices that the new energy price cap will be set. We already saw a 12% increase in October. Now the average price is £1,277. The average householder. As you say, that's forecast. It could be £2,000. It could be even more. And when you look at some of the fixed price deals that you can get today, they're talking about fixed price deals of £2,500. And in some cases, I saw an example of £4,000. Now, when you get these type of rapid increases, that is going to be politically unhelpful, shall we say. But the answer is in our hands. We have had a failed energy policy in the UK for far too long. We are just finally realising that a nuclear future is a beneficial place to be. But the trouble is that takes a very, very long time. And you will see our current nuclear power stations, ageing as they are, being turned off way before new ones will be turned on. We made that rather daft decision to reduce our gas storage facilities. We closed the Rough, the biggest one we had was called the Rough field, which was an extinct a gas field that had exhausted itself. And the government decided that saving 700 million over 10 years was a price worth paying. And we're now seeing energy price volatility that we've never seen before.
Craig, can I come in here? Because I want to talk about what was in the letter and what you were asking government to do to reduce the price. Because I don't know if you heard a little bit earlier, John Rentoul was on saying, I can't believe that you've asked to do this. And I said, no, it was a Brexit dividend. We should be able to reduce the VAT. I obviously signed that letter too. But do you want to say what, why, and why it was a Conservative idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was going around a rather circuitous way of getting to that answer, Esther. No, there are two levers that the government does have in its hands. Number one is VAT. VAT is levelled at 5% on domestic energy. Now, we couldn't reduce that because that was a requirement of EU membership. So we could reduce that 5% down to 0% now that we are free of the European Union. Now, of course, as the saying goes, it's only 5%, but every little helps. So that's one lever that the government has. Now, the other lever, and that's a rather more expensive one, is the 25% levy that is part of the green levies and environmental levies that we all pay on our electricity bills. Now, that becomes a rather more substantial amount. Now, whether that should be removed entirely and forever or just temporarily to get us over this energy price hump, well, I'm fairly flexible on that. But we need some help by April to stop consumers having to pay hundreds and hundreds of pounds more for what is a basic requirement. We don't heat our homes for fun. We do it because we have to. And, in a first world country, having the basic luxury of a house that's warmish, I don't think is something that we should be begging for. So those two levers are in the hands of government. International gas prices are perhaps outside its control, but there are things that the government could do on that.
OK, Craig, I have got to cut across you again. This is a news station and we've got to go to the news in a second. We'll be talking about this story later on today. But have you had an answer yet? Is this going to be a yes? Are you going to win this campaign? And you can only give a yes-no answer.
Yes, I have. But I'll say no more as to who contacted me.
Oh, well, then I feel we need that to be breaking news on GB News. So maybe we'll come back to you straight afterwards or the next show on after me and we'll get the answer, what that reply was. So you better stay watching GB News to find out what that was. So almost a year since rioters stormed the Capitol building in the US, with many voters believing the election was stolen. We'll be asking Sunday Times columnist Sarah Baxter if democracy there is in danger. But first, here's the news.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. Here are the latest headlines. Secondary school pupils in England are being told to take COVID tests before starting the new term. Face masks will also be mandatory in schools in England for those students for at least the next 3 weeks. And classes may be merged if too many teachers are off sick. The new rules are being introduced by the Education Secretary to try to curb the spread of Omicron.
I want to keep Omicron out of the classroom and students in the classroom, and not for a day longer. As soon as we see that we can transition this particular variant from where we are today, where obviously London was the epicenter, but it's now rising in other parts of the country. As soon as we make sure that staff absenteeism is under control, we were at 8% at the end of last year. Then I don't want children to be wearing.
Well, meanwhile, Mr Zahawi also says there's nothing in the data that justifies extending COVID restrictions. Currently in England, face masks are mandatory in shops and on public transport, and employees are encouraged to work from home. The government will review these Plan B regulations on Wednesday. In other news now, legal documents Prince Andrew's lawyers hope will end the civil sex abuse case against him. They're going to be made public. The Duke of York's legal team say the case should be thrown out because of a 2009 settlement between his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew denies any wrongdoing. In the US, 2 people are missing after wildfires developed. Flames in Colorado spread over an area of 9 square miles, destroying nearly 1,000 homes and buildings. Police investigating the blaze haven't ruled out arson. You are up to date. I'll be back with more on today's top stories at 1 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing. It's been a big year for Northern Ireland. Loyalist riots in April, debates on the North-Irish Protocol, and restriction after restriction on masks, hospitality and socialising across Ulster. But is there hope for the province in 2022 as it heads into a May election? Our Northern Ireland correspondent, Dougie Beattie, sent this report.
Does anybody here or anywhere else in Northern Ireland who has any basic understanding of Irish history think it would be a good idea to put border posts on the island of Ireland? I'm not sure they do.
This is not the way forward. Politics is how we're going to resolve these issues around the protocol. We're making progress. We didn't have violence over the summer, and that's when we made the progress.
Government needs to take a hold of the situation, recognise what they've done, and if they didn't intend to subjugate the Act of Union, then they need to reverse it by repudiating the protocol.
So the principle is that's important to unions, and we want the substance put back in now, which would balance then, any agreement.
2021 has seen political understanding set back 20 years. Arguments over the protocol, culture and the past now dominate our headlines and feature highly in our courts. The lack of clear direction around COVID and the hospitality business has been an embarrassment for this executive.
Pre-COVID, we're Northern Ireland's fourth largest private sector employer. By a third of all Northern agri-food, account for 2/3 of tourism spend. Today, we estimate just in the Christmas period alone, our industry has lost between 250 to 300 million. That's the money that carries us through January and February. We are officially open, but effectively closed.
Wholesalers and retailers also struggle to see the wisdom in a government controlled by a huge public sector and no clear lines of communication or planning.
Unfortunately, the worst jurisdiction has been the Northern Ireland Executive. It's the not knowing is the hardest part for us as businesses. They don't understand that hospitality has a supply chain behind that, be it food, drink, whatever, fresh veg, fresh food, and we have to try and plan, and without any kind of level of guidance or thought process, that is very, very difficult. Throughout this pandemic, we haven't even had rates relief in our business as a food wholesaler. From all of those lockdowns, the amount of lost stock is in the tens of thousands of pounds for us as a business. And the view has been, well, that's a too difficult box to tick, so we just have to deal with that.
Inflation is causing huge problems, especially in farming. Farmers are asking for flexibility around legislation to cushion the financial shocks around fuel, fertiliser and feed.
It's coming out of a pandemic. I think the rules and regulations would need to be eased. They weren't enforced during the pandemic. Our inspections were eased off till 2 years, 3-year period, similar till MOTs and cars. The pandemic has actually showed us that these things can be eased off. They don't have to be done every year, that the rules and regulations and stipulations, they don't have to be enforced till such a degree that it's crippling us.
2022 is an election year and all parties are now playing to their electorate. That means very little will be achieved and nationalists will be pushing for this election to be turned into a border poll. This is the Irish border. Right now, I'm in the EU, and across that stretch of water behind me is the UK. This piece of land has been fought upon for generations. Now it's about to be fought over, and not by those who can't decide the rules of how to worship the same God, but by those who can't decide the rules of how to trade with the same people. The Irish roads between the UK and the EU have no border posts and only small signs telling you about your speed limits, letting you know if you're in kilometres or miles per hour. Northern Ireland is part of the 5th largest economy in the world. The UK's gross domestic product is in around $3 trillion. The Republic of Ireland is $388 billion, and about 20% of that comes from Britain. As elections come into view, will it be COVID, the protocol, or the border poll that dominate? Dougie Beattie, GB News, on the Irish border.
That was our Northern Ireland correspondent there, Dougie Beattie. Thank you very much. It's a year since rioters stormed the Capitol building in protest at the American election result. President Biden has not united the country, and some fear civil war could eventually break out. Well, someone who knows America very well indeed is Sunday Times columnist and former deputy editor, Sarah Baxter. Sarah, you wrote quite an alarming piece yesterday suggesting some now believe that the states could slide into civil war. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and how you came to that conclusion?
Yes, well, if you remember a year ago, there was extraordinary scenes of violence at the Capitol. Some were even carrying the flag of the South, the secessionist flag of Dixie. And but everybody thought that this was, or everybody seemed to think this was a sort of really weird incident that would finish off Donald Trump, that he would be very isolated after that. But in a peculiar way, his strength has grown by refusing to accept that he lost the election, despite overwhelming evidence that he did. He has managed to persuade his base that he is exactly what they always loved him for, a fighter. And he's managed to sort of puff himself up and sort of come back and actually persuade about over 70% of Republican voters that the election was indeed stolen. And there's even been a poll just yesterday around the same time as my own article came out. It came out in the Washington Post saying that about 40% of Republicans and independent voters thought that violence could be justified. And this is an extraordinary situation 12 months on. Now, I live in a corner of Pennsylvania which is quite heavily pro-Trump. And people say to me all the time things, sometimes they say it nonchalantly, sometimes, with a sort of almost eager anticipation that there's going to be civil war in this country in the next 10 years or so. And I look at them and I say, really? And they say, yes. And sometimes I think it's because they're armed to the teeth and there's something that means they quite like to use those weapons. And at other times I just think, actually, the divisions are so profound now between, blue democratic America and red Republican America, between urban America and rural America. And there's so much now surrounding whether or not Joe Biden is president of all America that the dividing lines are getting really entrenched. And it is pretty scary.
I read those polls as well, and that divide, more than a third, nearly 40% of Americans said that they would, use violence against their own government. And as you said, it was concerning because it had increased from just sort of 10% who would have done that in the 1990s. So there has been a movement forward. So what I'd like to know, and what are you hearing on the ground, 6th of January will be the anniversary of Capitol Hill. Is that going to be a flashpoint? What's going to happen on that day?
Well, Donald Trump is going to sort of troll the half of America that didn't vote for him by holding a press conference on that day at his resort in Florida at Mar-a-Lago, basically undoubtedly repeating his claims that the election was stolen, even though he's never actually managed to produce evidence to that effect at all in court or elsewhere. And so he's going to, but it doesn't matter. As I said, he's seen as a fighter. People like the fact that he refuses to accept that he might have lost. And so he's going to rub people's noses in the fact that he's still around. And in contrast, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, very much a hated figure among Trump supporters, is going to hold her own day of sort of prayerfulness, unity and patriotism. And that, in a sense, is itself a dig at the other side, far from being about unity, because, of course, it's It's the Trump supporters who claim they were the supposed true patriots on that day when they stormed the Capitol. So she's now trying to reclaim the word, but it's always a bad sign, I'm afraid, Esther, when people can't agree on who are the patriots. And the militias used to be a sort of oddball, group. It was, America always had extremists, but as you say, at most it was sort of 10% of the population. But helped by accelerants like social media, the situation has really got to quite an alarming divide now.
And you're right, Trump hasn't gone away. Some might even say he's becoming more popular and he's going to have his own sort of social media platform. But there is the midterm elections coming. What is going to happen there? Predictions for Trump, the Republican Party?
Well, I think the Republican Party will probably do very well unless there's a remarkable turnaround, because ever since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the failure to contain COVID, and the inflationary pressures on the American economy, Joe Biden's been in a lot of trouble. And he's not seen as particularly effective. The truth is, he was never seen as likely to be particularly effective, but he was seen as the anti-Trump candidate. But in the midterm elections, where the presidency is not on the ballot, but control of the houses of Congress, I think the Republicans will do very well. And Trump will take that as a signal that all is forgiven for January 6th. And he wants to come storming back, get revenge, and win another time.
Now, in the Times today, it says hard left Democrats are plotting to unseat, as they see it, they're failing Biden. So they're saying the new sort of left-wing Democrats, whether that's the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, are sort of coming forward wanting to oust him. Is that going to happen?
Well, I don't think that a progressive candidate will necessarily win. They've had a series of disastrous slogans like defund the police, which every major city, which had a spike in crime as a result, had to backpedal. The progressives have not had a good year, but what they think is that Joe Biden's going to be too old to stand at the next election. He's already, almost 80. He's going to be 82 at the time of the next inauguration if he wins. And I think they want to make sure they've got a candidate on the ballot who can represent their views. I don't think America is feeling very much like having a progressive candidate at the moment. In fact, a lot of people say it's the progressives who helped to torpedo Joe Biden's Build Back Better bills and helped to have a disaster recently in the Virginia governorship election.
So challengers might want Biden to go, but Biden himself, is he planning to remain in post? I mean, will it be a rerun of the last American election?
I think Joe Biden very much intends to remain in post, no matter what people say about his abilities at this stage. Just remember, he tried and tried to become president for so long. He's waited for this, to become president for half a century. He's not about to chuck it in now. I think he would love to serve 2 terms. And in fact, he's pretty much said so now. And the fact that Kamala Harris has been underperforming as his vice president pretty much clears the route for him to stand again if he wants to. But of course, if he looks like he's going to lose and lose badly, it may be, people have told me it'll be up to his wife, Jill, to tell him enough, time to go, Joe.
And, as we look at the year ahead, people have been given predictions, what's going to happen in 2022. We see big geopolitical shifts. We see people concerned about the new sort of ever-expanding China. We see, as it might be, America weakened. How do you see these shifts and moves globally?
Well, one of the very damaging things about the very hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan is that it did weaken America geopolitically and emboldened its enemies because it was seen that America didn't want any more adventures abroad. So very recently, Joe Biden has been talking tough about Russian maneuvers on the borders of Ukraine, saying that he's just been on the phone yesterday with the Ukrainian president saying that we're going to stand by you. And he's been delivering similar messages to Taiwan, where China seems very much on maneuvers, having subdued Hong Kong pretty effectively lately. But does anyone believe him? Is he ready for the sort of toughness that might be required against very formidable adversaries. He can talk tough, and he can talk about further sanctions and punitive measures or trade measures, etc., etc. But he's definitely his credibility's definitely been weakened by the events in Afghanistan, no doubt.
And again, talking about China, we've got again world news here in the Times. China's bullying is a warning to Europe, claim the Lithuanians. They're concerned about this, China moving, expanding into other countries across the globe.
Yeah, well, China has an extremely active diplomatic as well as military wing, which is basically all about money, economy, deals, helping countries with debt, etc. And then of course, China acts like it owns these countries. So the bill that comes in later turns out to be pretty heavy. Lithuania, of course, has a long experience of having Russia on its border, and is very alarmed there by Putin's. Putin seems incredibly emboldened recently, and that's a worry for them.
And finally, Sarah, have you got any predictions for 2022 that you'd like to leave with us?
Well, I do think that it's going to be a difficult year for the Democrats. I do think the Republicans have got every chance of coming back and holding the majority in Congress, which, particularly in the Senate, which is 50-50 at the moment. And if they do that, it's very difficult for the Democrats to pass anything. And at that point, I think you'll see Donald Trump talking more openly about standing again in 2024. But, a lot of Republicans think he'd be far better off as a kingmaker, that they could really trounce Biden if they backed somebody who said nice things about Trump but wasn't actually Trump, because Trump still remains a divisive figure and someone who could really turn out otherwise disaffected Democrats to vote against him.
He didn't have those two terms, did he? I think, he might want to come back to prove a point. So he might want to be a kingmaker, but at the end of the day, I'm quite sure he'd sooner be the king. Sarah, thank you.
Right.
You totally think I'm totally right. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully speak to you again soon. But just before we go, let's have a look at what your guest's been saying, what you've been writing in with. Julian says, this is the GB Views, testing school children should be stopped. It is a farce, as is mask wearing all day. We need to just get on with a normal school day now. Teachers have been jabbed. When are we going to get over this virus? And Adrian says, can someone please explain why MPs who supported HS2 bleating about power prices, please? How many projects and subsidies could have benefited from such a folly? And more incredulously, I read in the papers of talks about a tunnel to Ireland. Who do these people think they are? Are they now detached from reality? And Paul says, I don't like that children are wearing masks in school, but that is better than learning from home. It's a tough decision, but one that had to be made. Well, there you go. Those are all your views. Thank you very much indeed. That's been it from me on The Brief today. Gloria will be back tomorrow, but now it's time for Liam Halligan.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us